It is my pleasure today to introduce to you Shane Ellison. Shane, let me just get you on board here and show your face. And Shane has recently finished 5 years as the Chief Executive Officer of Auckland Transport. By New Zealand standards, this is a very large, very complex local body organisation. Obviously very experienced executive, but one of the things that stood out for me and one of the things I'm excited about today is Shane's leadership approach, very high in empathy, very much leading by example, and a very strong belief that culture is a key ingredient to organisational success. Kia ora, Shane. How are you, mate?
Kia ora, Neil. Great to be here.
Good on you, mate. Thanks very much for your time. Know how important that is. Now we're going to get this underway straight away, and I think we're going to start with a video. So let me share my screen and let's have a little bit of a video talking about Auckland Transport.
For me personally, I've been working with Human Synergistics probably for about 15 plus years and many other roles. At Auckland Transport, we partnered with Human Synergistics about 4.5 years ago. Our new CE, Shane Ellison, came in and he'd worked with Human Synergistics offshore and loved the tool. So we did, I guess, a baseline OCI or diagnostic of our culture back in 2018, and we've worked with Human Synergistics over the last 4.5 years to drive the change needed.
The results have been good, and we're stoked with them as an organisation. What's been great from our perspective in terms of seeing some of those changes and what we've learnt, it's really been around leaders and how they care for their people, particularly as we've gone through COVID. And we're not all in the building anymore, we're kind of in different environments, and what that's meant for culture, what it's meant for leaders in terms of connecting with their people. Really, it's been quite a sensational experience.
So we looked at Human Synergistics as a partner because of what they bring to the space, the tools they use, the OCI model and the LSI models are really, they're a really good framework to build our leadership and culture journey off. They sort of gave us the lattice to grow everything up, really.
Some of the results that have stood out have been a real marked change in the way that we interact with each other, also the way our leaders have developed, the way they've embraced the concept of them being in the driver's seat when it comes to culture change, but also through the wider organisation, how our people have got in behind us as well and wanted to participate and be part of that change. So that whole concept of leaders driving organisation and therefore performance and culture, but also people buying into wanting to do that as well and come on the journey.
So the numbers speak for themselves. We first ran the OCI survey back in 2018, again in 2020, and again more recently in 2022. We've seen an amazing increase in constructive behaviours. They've increased by 19.75%. We've also seen a decrease in the passive styles. They've decreased by 21.75%, and alongside that we've seen the aggressive styles also decrease significantly by 24%. So overall a massive shift in our culture, which is really awesome.
One of the other results we've seen that's quite relevant now is our employment brand. People are starting to look at AP as an attractive employer, a place they want to come and work and they want to stay. So the work we've done around culture has really helped us promote ourselves as an organisation and why it's a good place to work. Yeah, it's an attractive proposition now.
Yeah, all yours, Shane.
Kia ora. Thanks, Neil. E nā iwi whānui ki ngā taupitoa Aotearoa me te papaka a Māui. Kua hui hui mai nei te wā. He mahi manahau. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. A big hi to all of you that are around New Zealand and Australia today. It's great to be here. and talk about the culture story of Auckland Transport. Today in the short section, I'm going to give you some background, a little bit of background about Auckland Transport, give you a snapshot of my perspectives on the cultural journey, and give you 2 or 3 key takeaways of what we've learned. So let's get started. I'm not going to assume that any of you know too much about Auckland Transport, or AT, as it is more commonly known. So by way of background, as Neil's kind of touched on, AT is a 100% council-owned organisation created in 2010. It's responsible for planning, building, operating, and maintaining the transport system of the Auckland region. It's the guardian of $23 billion, that's New Zealand dollars, of assets, and has annual revenues of $2 billion. It's responsible for roads, footpaths, public transport services, and facilities, parking, the harbour master function, and even a couple of small airfields. So quite a broad range of activities. As Neil's also said, we're a public agency. It's an environment which is complex and ambiguous, and there is a high amount of public interest, probably too much public interest in what it is we actually do. So that gives you a bit of a flavour for AT and what it does. I'd now like to just paint a picture for you of what it was like in December 2017 when I walked in the door and when I started in the role of Chief Executive. So aside from my sense of the organisation having wanting to do the right thing, our people wanting to do the right thing, my feeling as a newcomer was that the environment was impersonal and devoid of colour. For me, even as the Chief Executive, I felt uncomfortable in the environment. And while there was no intent from anybody to make it that way, it almost felt that it was quite exclusionist, or even, dare I say, hostile at times. I remember quite vividly when doing what you're supposed to do as a leader and walking the floors, and going up to people and, you know, smiling and saying hello. And it was almost like they'd duck for cover. They were terrified of engaging with the Chief Executive. And lastly, I remember executive meetings. The predominant behaviours were around being critical, pointing out flaws in what was being presented from managers and our people. And there was, you know, part of the common vocabulary that we had was, oh, we need to relitigate some of the decisions that we'd made. So all in all, yeah, not a great environment. And you can probably, many of you will pick out the cultural styles that were prevalent in AT in late 2017 and early 2018. Before I started at Auckland Transport, the board of directors, and we have a board of directors, were clear that they wanted the Chief Executive to transform the culture. In fact, almost anywhere you went in Auckland, people would volunteer an opinion about the culture of AT. It's true. But opinions only get you so far. And for me, it was really, really important that I had an evidence base to work from. As Tash pointed out in the video, I'd worked with human synergistics tools and an accredited HR practitioner, Jess, I hope you're out there today. Jess is from Organisation Dynamics, and I'd worked with Jess in an organisation called Devon Australia. And I'd got really comfortable with the strong links between culture and performance that came from the human synergistics tools. So for me, it was a really easy go-to in terms of how we might move this challenge forward. We ran our first OCI and OEI in 2018. And as expected, the results weren't great. They reinforced pretty much what I've said to you in the last couple of minutes. The primary style at play was avoidance, and this was closely followed by oppositional as the secondary style. Other aggressive and passive defensive styles were also dominant, with constructive styles other than a small glimmer of light around humanistic and encouraging, really not getting a look in. But you've always got to look for the positives. And for me, it was great to see the level of participation and the willingness of our people to be honest and tell us what it was like working at AT. Over 80% of our people took part in that first OCI and OEI. So it's 80% of 1,900 permanent staff. And for me, that was really encouraging because it meant that people wanted to engage, they wanted to be part of this journey, and it meant that cynicism was pretty low. And from my perspective, I had the sense that cynicism could really undermine what we wanted to achieve. So what did all this mean? Well, what it told us is that our people felt constrained. They felt like they couldn't give their best. And ultimately, they couldn't deliver the type of experience that they wanted to give the communities of Tamaki Makaurau, Auckland. Obviously, things needed to change. And if we were ever to become a more effective organisation for both our employees and our customers, then there was a lot of cultural heavy lifting that needed to be done. And that needed to be done both to improve our reputation, but also to improve the experience that our people were having while working at AT. For us, it was the old adage, was what was happening on the inside was also very visible on the outside. So we were really transparent with our people in terms of the results of the OCI and OEI. For me, it was about repaying the leap of faith that they had all made and taking the time to complete the OCI and the OEI. You know, they're really, really data rich, but let's not kid ourselves. They take some time for your people to complete. About the same time, and this was mid-2018, we hired some new talent, and we set to work on transforming our culture. A key piece of the puzzle was a significant culture and transformation program. The program was led by Natasha Whiting, who you saw in the video, and we couldn't have wished for a more capable and competent individual to do this. And after building some trust with the executive and senior leaders, the program was also embraced and championed by them. It was always going to need more than both Tash and I putting our shoulders to the wheel, and to use a transport pun, you're not stuck in traffic, you are the traffic, to shift our culture. Hence for us, empowerment and employee involvement were really, really key. There were 6 big things that we focused on through our culture and transformation program, and I'll quickly talk to those. First of all, there was our values, and I heard Dan talking about those before. So we invited our people to co-create our refreshed AT values. This allowed us to foster an understanding that it's not only important what we do at AT, it was also important that we thought about how we do it. For me, the values, more than any other organisation, were lived, owned and breathed by our employees. From there, our leadership tohu were created. Simply put, the tohu described the ways leaders were expected to role model those values. We also, along the way, discovered that our values and leadership tohu align nicely with the constructive styles of the circumplex. The second big thing we focused on was purpose and clarity. Together with our people, again, we created a simple plan on a page, including our purpose statement, Easy Journeys. We communicated the plan, referring to it in everyday korero to keep it front of mind. It outlined what our customers wanted us to deliver and the agreed behaviours we expected from our people. The third big thing we focused on was leadership. Along with setting leadership expectations, we focused on developing self-awareness amongst our leaders using the LSI 360 diagnostic. Hundreds of our leaders have now done this. The LSI tool allowed us to embed a common language. This common language, along with educating our leaders on the How Culture Works model, enabled us to understand the data and highlight opportunities for change. We then shifted our focus to leadership capability by developing our flagship leadership development program. This is helping our leaders to gain the skills and knowledge to lead others, lead business outcomes, and lead cross-functionally across the organisation. Ultimately, the focus on leadership has enabled us to link the impact leaders have, both in terms of culture, but also performance. The fourth big thing we focused on was diversity and inclusion. Most of you will know that Auckland is a multicultural city, and AT certainly reflects that in our workforce composition. It's especially critical that an organisation with the region's name in its title is representative of the region it serves. We set bold targets for things such as the percentage of women in senior leadership roles and the representation of Māori and Pacifica in our workforce. I'm really pleased to say that since 2017, we have moved from 25.9% to 35.7% women in senior leadership roles, with an aspiration to hit 40% by the end of this calendar year. The fifth thing we focused on was well-being. The complexity of our environment and the demands that are often put on our people made us realise early on that we need to look after our people's well-being. We developed Order, our well-being framework. It has allowed us to provide support to individuals at the right time, and it's gone a long way to assuring our people that they realise that we as an employer genuinely care. It couldn't have been more timely because it allowed us to respond to the pandemic, allowing us to catch people before they fell and walk with them through some of the challenges they faced from the broad impacts of COVID. The sixth and the last thing that we focused on is agility. Trust has been integral in the way we think about new ways of working. We have hybrid working, enabling our teams to perform at their best no matter where they are. We're reducing our office footprint and changing office layout to better suit hybrid working, instilling a start with trust culture in our leaders, which has been key to this. As a result of all this work and focus, we saw initial positive change in our first OCI and OEI retest in 2020, just before COVID-19 arrived in New Zealand. It really encouraged us to keep going. Our collective efforts then saw great improvement in our 2022 results. The video clip at the start talked about where AT is now at an organisational level with lots of good shifts. But where is AT through the eyes of its recently finished Chief Executive? Well, to be honest, and being really upfront, I wasn't actually sure what the results were going to be earlier this year, 2 years after the last OCI and OEI retest. I just wasn't sure how COVID-19 might impact on our culture. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that before I finish. But having had the results and reflecting on them, it is now easy to see how far AT has come. It's an organisation that's far more human, an organisation where connection is important. And if you look beyond the results and listen to the conversations that people have, you'll hear that people are happier, they're more open, and more people are working collaboratively. But the culture journey is never over. The Circumplex still highlights opportunities for the future, and there are teams where there are still big opportunities to create a better culture. I have no doubt the work will still continue. Before I finish, as I said, there have been some key learnings from COVID-19. I'd almost be so bold as to say that COVID-19 has been a blessing in terms of culture change. In a time of crisis, your culture takes over. We had done the hard yards, as they say, and our culture had become more empathetic, and we were braver about experimenting. COVID-19 gave us the opportunity to do some things differently, which we wouldn't have done back in 2018. Again, being straight up and honest, I can't claim we were so deliberate as to consciously think about levers for cultural change when COVID-19 hit, but we were forced to adapt, and the way we did things, for the most part, played out in our favour. By way of just one example, there have been some big lifts in our scores for upwards and downwards communication. COVID-19 meant we regularly held Microsoft Teams events with up to 1,000 of our people to reassure them, to connect with them, and to hear what they had to say in an unfiltered way. It meant messaging was coming straight from the chief executive and other senior people to everyone at the same time. How can that not improve upward and downward communication? As I say, from a culture perspective, COVID-19 has really been our friend. To finish, here are just 3 key takeouts from me. The first one is, it's not possible to expect your people to execute strategy and realise their full potential in a defensive culture. It just won't happen on a sustainable basis. Secondly, the OEI and OCI tools provide accurate data that organisations can use at an organisational level, but also at an individual team level to affect culture change. For me, it's important not only to talk about the data, but take action based off it. And thirdly, change elicits an emotional response. So take your people on the journey of cultural transformation by asking what their ideal future state is, where are they now, and listening with empathy and facilitating the direction that they want to go. Kua mutu ngā kōrero, nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. I'll leave it there for now, but I'm happy to hand back to you, Neil, and hear any questions.
Hey, thanks very much, Shane. Yeah, outstanding, mate. And look, they reckon a picture tells 1,000 words, and so I wonder if we just don't very quickly look at these 3 pictures here in respect to the impact. We can see the causal factors from 2018 through to 2022, and we can see all those colours, especially on the right-hand side, those very impressive leadership colours and the growth that they have. We see the change that those causal factors have incurred from 2018 through to 2022, and see the sample size increase as well as people have got more and more interested, and of course the impact on outcomes and that steady growth across every single one. As you said, mate, still plenty of work to be done, but a great journey thus far for Auckland Transport. Hey, a couple of very quick questions. There's been quite a few questions around the role of senior leaders, senior leadership teams. Is there a need to change people out when you're introducing the new language and the new approach? What are your quick thoughts on that?
Hey, look, good question, Neil. And I don't think it's a straight yes or no answer. I think it depends on whether senior leaders are willing to come on board and, as Dan said, get on the bus, quite frankly. It took a little bit of time. It took some time to build psychological safety amongst team members. And I think it took a little bit for people to see, hey, the new guy's serious. He's genuine about this, and clearly Tash coming on board shortly after we did the OCI and OEI, and Tash was as committed as I was, but it didn't take that long, and people embraced it, and they were up for it.
Yeah, great. Thanks very much. And look, one question that's just come up, you know, Auckland Transport, does it have much to do with unions, and did unions play a role in the journey?
Yeah, look, good question. So about 30% of our workforce is unionised. It's largely composed of people that are frontline type workers, work in parking, customer services and things like that. They could see, over time, they could see the journey that was gone on, and we involved people represented by the unions in that co-creation work that we were doing. And so we got no real pushback, to be honest. And there was a big step change shortly after COVID hit. We gave a commitment that we were going to look after as many full-time jobs as we possibly could, and we held true to that. We set out an employee support fund. So there were a lot of things that were in it that was represented in how we lived our values, which meant that while they weren't our cheerleaders necessarily, they weren't blockers either.
Yeah, great. Hey, participation's key, right?
Yeah.
Hey, kia ora, Shane. Ngā mihi, mate. Thanks very much again, and I hope to see you again soon.
Cool. Cheers, Neil.
Cheers, Shane.